In today's video, we have some updates on some more players getting PTOs for the NHL season. We have an update on top prospect Matvei Michkov from the KHL. We also have news on the Buffalo Sabres and their ticket sale restrictions. And we have some trade talk centered around William Nylander and Elias Pettersson in Vancouver. A lot more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a fair bit to cover here today. I want to start off with the news out of Russia regarding top prospect and Flyers high pick Matvei Michkov. Now, of course, the KHL season is getting started here in the last few days. Matvei Michkov, of course, has a contract to play in Russia for the next few years. We know, based on everything that was revealed, that we knew about this player before the Flyers selected him in the 2023 NHL draft, that he was most likely going to play over there for about 3 years. Now, there's always a possibility that Michkov and the team come to terms on a contract termination sooner than that, and he comes over earlier, but that's how things stand. Now, of course, Philadelphia, I'm sure, would like to get him into North America as soon as possible, but that's usually not how things go. Now, today, his KHL club actually made him a healthy scratch in this season opener. Now, the team put out a statement when they were asked about it, basically saying that they have to look after wins and losses, and essentially that he's probably going to be in a role where he's going to be not playing a huge amount and kind of like an extra almost. I mean, of course, it is translated from Russian, so it's not perfect, but that's kind of like a general synopsis of what they had to say, in that, everything he gets, he's going to have to earn it. So that's probably not what the Flyers and their fans would want to hear. Certainly, if he's going to stay over in Russia, you would want him to be getting the best opportunity for, solid career development. If he's going to stay over there, that's got to be the top priority. Now, a lot of Russian players stay over there for a variety of reasons why they don't come right away. One, I think they sometimes have an opportunity to earn more money in their early career with the KHL than they would on an ELC and the NHL. There's a bit of a money factor. I think to some degree they obviously want to play in Russia because it's their home country. So I do think they feel combination of feeling obligated and just wanting to, because they, of course, want to play in front of their family and in their home country, which totally makes sense and understandable. But certainly, from a development standpoint, I'm sure the NHL would like to get their players that they draft over to North America and into their systems, whether it be the NHL or AHL, as soon as possible. Now, this player appears to be, from what we know of him, like if he came to North America right away, I would think there's a decent chance he would play in Philadelphia this year, or maybe have a split season between the NHL and AHL. I'm not sure, but the Flyers are certainly not in that big a rush. But at the same time, I think they're willing to give him a chance if he can show he can play. It's just that simple. But you have to wonder too, is there a connection? Because there's a lot of questions been raised for this. Of course, Michkov, a Flyers pick. Well, what else is going on with another Flyers contracted player that going on over there? And that's the goaltender, right? Ivan Fedotov. So I mean, clearly he's under contract to the Flyers this year, and he's playing in Russia anyways. And he and the Russian team are defying the contract, defying the ruling from the IIHF. And you got to wonder: is there certainly? Are they not playing him just to, like in Michkov's case, just to kind of mess with the Flyers? Obviously, the relationship between the KHL and the NHL is not good right now. You have to think that the relationship between the Flyers and the league is not good right now. And you can't help but wonder if there's more at play here than just the possibility that he just hasn't earned his spot and that he's just not going to have a big role on that team this year. I just don't know that that's good for his development. If they don't think he can have a big role in the team, why wouldn't they want him to play somewhere else where he can play, even if it meant him going down a level, to get a bigger role, bigger minutes, and work on things. Just doesn't make sense, and I'm sure this is not news that the Flyers and their fans want to hear, but that's certainly what's going on right now. And it doesn't sound like it's going to be a great year for him in the KHL if it's kind of behavior is going to continue. The other thing too is honestly, like, even if they have every legit reason to say he hasn't earned his spot, that's concerning too, because then why wouldn't they let him go somewhere else where he can get better development, even if that is North America? But obviously, strained relationships right now could be playing a role in this development of the prospect, which I hope doesn't hurt Philadelphia long term. But certainly a couple of scenarios there that's not favorable for sure. A couple of updates regarding some potential PTOs. Nothing's confirmed as of yet, but former first-round pick way back in 2008, Tyler Ennis, who, of course, longtime Buffalo Sabre, played with a variety of other teams, Minnesota, Edmonton, Ottawa, Toronto. Ennis is looking for another opportunity in the NHL. He bounced around on a lot of one-year deals there for a good stretch, and then ended up going to Europe last year, played in the Swiss League, had a real solid year, actually had some of the best offensive numbers that he's put up in a while, kind of refound and regained part of his game back, which was good for him. And now he's looking to see if that is enough to get another NHL opportunity. There's still a possibility he heads back and plays in the Swiss League. I think he still has some irons in the fire there and possibility for a contract again. But he obviously would prefer to play in the NHL. And there are some reports that, I don't know which team, but there's a team in the Western Conference that is reportedly considering giving him a PTO. So we'll see if Tyler Ennis can make a return to the NHL or if he'll head back to Europe. Former Anaheim Duck and still a young player with potential in front of him here, Max Comtois, still unsigned, like some of these other players are. I wouldn't have expected this, a few months ago, but there is some speculation now that he's going to end up getting a PTO as well, and he's not going to get a full contract just yet, but that he may be going to camp with the Vegas Golden Knights. So obviously the Golden Knights are a team that would have seen him, more than a lot of teams playing in the same division, and clearly probably are fully aware of what he can possibly bring, and could be a good depth piece for them, for like a bottom six role or 13th forward or something along those lines. So we'll see if Comtois can get himself a contract, and hopefully we get more confirmation of those soon. Obviously camps are, for the most part, just a little bit less than 3 weeks away now, so I would imagine you're probably going to see some PTOs probably ramp up here in the next week, because there's still lots of players out there that are unsigned and still have some question marks, including a guy like Tomas Tatar, which is surprising. So we'll see what ends up with some of these unsigned players that are still trying to sort out their employment for the upcoming year. Some news out of Buffalo, which I know has kind of gotten a few fans and people on social media riled up a little bit. But I understand in a way, and in a way I do, in a way I don't. But the Buffalo Sabres have confirmed that they're going to be limiting ticket sales, and they're probably going to be doing it by location. So obviously when you buy your tickets online, they know where you live. Obviously you have to put in your address and billing address for your credit card you're using or whatever. So like a combination of either zip code or area code or postal code, depending on, you live in Canada or United States. They're trying to give so that the building doesn't get overtaken by road teams. Apparently they had some feedback from players that, they'd like to see the road teams not overtake the building quite so often, and that, they're considering this as the way of trying to limit that. I mean, the main culprit here is, no surprise, is the Maple Leafs fans, because obviously Toronto is really not that far from Buffalo. I mean, Buffalo's right across the way, border of Niagara Falls, which isn't, all that far from Toronto. It's a pretty short drive. So you do get Leaf fans that will often go over to Buffalo for games. Even, they don't even have to live right in Toronto. Like I said, if you live down closer, like, Hamilton or Niagara way, like it's real short distance to get over to Buffalo for a game. So, I do understand in a way, but at the same time, you don't want to lose out on ticket sales. I think maybe the better way to do it, instead of putting a limit, is, and it wouldn't be surprising if all teams eventually kind of consider the concept of maybe giving home fans first dibs first, but I mean, you don't want to like prevent people from coming. You have to have a mix of fans on the building. All buildings end up with people from different places, that are traveling, visiting to watch games, etc. So it's a slippery slope. Like, you don't want to miss out on opportunities. And the other thing too is, as we know, because we've seen this before, when teams have tried this, is common. This is not the first time this has happened. It's happened in playoffs and other times. And people will find ways to get there one way or another. And it's just going to backfire. So you might as well just put your tickets up for sale, and whatever will be. Ultimately, if your home base is that passionate about your team, they'll find a way to get their tickets. But I mean, there are some teams like the Leafs that are just, their fans are everywhere. It's probably fair to say the Maple Leafs have the biggest fan base across the NHL. You see Leafs merchandise in just about anywhere you travel. I've been to some pretty obscure places that I wouldn't think I'd run into hockey fans at all, and I see Leaf gear, right? It's just the way it is. Everybody just needs to accept that, and ultimately, they're going to go to games. It's just that simple. So I know it's not been a great reaction. I will be surprised to see here if they don't maybe change their minds on the policy or tweak it somehow. But that is the latest out of Buffalo, which is kind of, like I said, getting a lot of people talking about that situation online. Now, as I mentioned, a couple of players I want to talk about as far as the rumor mill goes. Now, these are not necessarily rumors from NHL insiders. These are more so proposed trades from hockey writers, kind of looking at, hey, this team should do this team should do that, and more like those types of scenarios. So, I mean, in a sense, like, there's rumors around these players, but not necessarily linked to said team. So, for example, let's start with Vancouver Canucks top centerman Elias Pettersson. Now, of course, Pettersson's been in the rumor mill since he did the interview with Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick during the European media tour for 32 Thoughts, the podcast. And essentially, he made it clear he's not ready to commit on a long-term contract to the Vancouver Canucks as of yet. He wants to bet on himself, have a solid start to the year, help the team, and really see the direction and, how much success this team can have before he commits to his next contract. He's not sure how long he wants that to be or what have you. So it kind of raised a lot of eyebrows and kind of got a lot of people talking about it. There's been obviously rumors about other teams that would be interested in him. At this point, I think we can all say for sure that the Canucks are nowhere near ready to trade Elias Pettersson. That is not their desire. Their desire is to keep him because he is a franchise player. I strongly believe that. He's been a real good guy for them. And as I've said when we talked about him before, I think if the Canucks had to trade Pettersson, that would be absolutely devastating. Those types of trades are very difficult to win. Sometimes you have to wait 3-4 years to even know if you've had a chance to win the deal. And it just would really set the team and the franchise back. There's no doubt. It would certainly create a lot of unhappy fans. There's no doubt. This team has already feels like it's been rebuilding and kind of not getting good progress for a while. To all of a sudden lose one of its top players like that because he doesn't want to be there, especially, would be just a real, kick between the legs, if you know what I'm saying. So at the end of the day here, this is not something they want to see. So other teams are looking at this and saying, hey, he doesn't want to commit there yet. We need to watch this scenario, and let's to kind of start prepping ourselves for the possibility that he won't sign there and maybe they have to move him. So that's what's causing all of the talk. So for Canuck fans, don't be upset that we're talking about Pettersson. I really don't think we're anywhere near something like this taking place. This is just for discussion purposes. And rumors are going to be around players when they only have a year on their contract, they're not signed, and especially if they'd made comments explicitly saying they're not ready to commit yet. So essentially, he's kind of caused the rumor mill to fire up on his own with his own comments. It's just that simple. And now other teams are taking notice. Other teams' writers are taking notice and reporters and are like, hey, maybe he could come here. Here's what a trade would look like. That's all this is. So Vegas Hockey Now has an article out talking about how, hey, Pettersson might be available next offseason, maybe Vegas should take a look at him. We know Vegas likes the latest, newest, shiniest toys on the market. They go after all the top players. They have since their existence started in their first offseason, and nothing else is going to change. That's just how they roll. And they have some players themselves that are kind of coming up for contract renewal that may be difficult to sign, which could create some roster flexibility, some cash cap flexibility if it doesn't work out, and could create a scenario where they may actually be able to pull this off. Now, of course, the two players we're talking about on Vegas side of things is not Elise Pettersson. He's on Vancouver, of course. Jonathan Marchessault and Chandler Stevenson. They're both pending UFAs, having big years last year. They won the Stanley Cup. They're going to be looking for raises, no doubt. And they're also not old players by any means, but they're not super young either. Marchessault's 32, Stevenson's 29. I still think Vegas would be interested in signing both, but depending on how the team sees their future and how many years and how much money, it could get tricky to keep them both. That's for certain. I mean, Vegas is pretty much running back almost exact same team this year after winning the Cup than they did last year. They really didn't do anything in the offseason. They traded Riley Smith to get some much-needed cap space so they could keep Ivan Barbashev, but they didn't really bring anybody new in. So the team is pretty much the same with a couple of small subtractions, and of course they'll be replaced internally. So they're going to have the same team this year, and then things are going to get interesting. As the season goes along, just like Pettersson, we're going to get a better idea what the future holds for Marchessault and Stevenson. Can you imagine if Vegas pulled off a trade for Pettersson and their top 6 centers were Jack Eichel and Pettersson? That would be ridiculous. They would be, incredibly fortunate to put that together. Now, what a trade will look like, we really don't know. And essentially, the main purpose of the article would be that you would gain the cap flexibility, the roster flexibility by having these other two players not come back. If it gets to that, doesn't mean they would be traded to Vancouver. At this point, we don't even know what Vancouver would want. I would expect they would want a big return. This is a franchise centerman who's young, and it could come with a long contract extension if things worked out. I would think it's going to be a huge asking price. And that Jonathan Marchessault and Chandler Stevenson, as much as they're good players, might not be the exact return that they have in mind. I suspect it wouldn't be. Like, you're probably looking at multiple first-round picks. You're probably looking at least one good prospect. I mean, maybe Brendan Brisson, who is probably one of their top prospects right now. I don't know exactly who would all be involved. It's difficult to say, but some combination of a lot of future-based assets. I suspect, though, that Vancouver, like I said, might have to take a contract on if they did this. Would Marchessault and Stevenson be moved separately? We don't know Vegas' strategy here. The other thing, too, is this may not even happen during the season. This would be afterwards. So at this point, Marchessault and Stevenson, if they remain unsigned, would also be in the same predicament as Pettersson, except they'd be UFAs where Pettersson's RFA. So they'd be trading their negotiating rights if they moved them before free agency began. So they're not looking at as much of a return. They could use them as basically their own rentals if things didn't work out. Now, I think the odds of them both not getting signed are probably not great. I would imagine they find a way to keep at least one, maybe both. We'll have to see. But does it make sense for Vegas to look into this? It does. It absolutely does. I mean, the writer's onto something saying that, hey, we have some of our own pending UFAs that may not come back. That could create some flexibility. And, hey, can you imagine what our team would be like if we had Eichel and Pettersson down the middle for the next 6, 7, 8 years? That's ridiculous. They would be in great shape. They have some great wingers already to play with those guys, and that would allow them to remain competitive. I mean, because obviously Vegas, as much as they won the Cup and they're a really good team, they are an older team. They do have a lot of their top guys are not exactly 21, 22 years old. They have a lot of players that are 29, 30 and up. So if they can find a way to remain a little bit younger and get some high-level talent in there, that would probably going to be their strategy the next year or two. So targeting players like Pettersson makes a ton of sense. Will it happen? The odds are against them. For one, like I said, Vancouver's priority is to sign him. It's a division rival, which they would probably prefer not to do. They're going to make them overpay to make it happen if they're going to do it. And it's just, the odds of it are slim. It's fun to talk about. I agree with the author's rationale in the article. But again, odds of it happening, probably pretty small. Now, I also want to look at another article from Chicago Hockey Now pondering about William Nylander. Now, of course, we know what some people think about William Nylander's status in Toronto. Some people are convinced he could stay. Many are convinced he's going to end up leaving. Some think he'll be traded during the season. Some thinks he walks as a UFA or that his rights are traded before we get to that next offseason. But we do know we talked probably around 2 weeks ago about a possibility of a Nylander to the Anaheim Ducks being traded. So, of course, Mike Rupp, an NHL former player, current analyst and insider on NHL Network, was talking about Nylander, saying how he feels his time in Toronto is coming to a close and that he feels, his opinion was that Nylander is traded during the season once the Leafs confirm basically that there's just no way they're going to get a contract done. And he felt Anaheim was a terrific landing spot to play with some of their top young players. They have a lot of cap space, so they can afford to give him what he wants for a contract. They have all kinds of young players in draft currency that they can use to intrigue the Leafs to make a trade. Well, Chicago Hockey Now essentially writes, listen, as much as this deal to Anaheim makes sense, why not Chicago? We're in the same boat. We're a team that's on the rise. We're a team that's rebuilding. We're a team that's accumulated a ton of assets in terms of good prospects and draft currency in the last couple of years since this teardown began. And, now that we have a guy like Connor Bedard, why doesn't it make sense to bring in another star player to flank him on the wing and be a terrific guy to help them boost each other's production? And again, make some valid points. Now, do I think William Nylander is going to end up in Chicago anytime soon? No, I don't. But I do think that it's a possibility because when you're looking at star players who want big money and teams can't afford to give it to them or don't think they're worth that much, the only way that some of these guys are going to get what they want is they're going to have to go from playing on a contending team to a team that's rebuilding because they have the more of the flexibility and the cap space to pay them. It's just that simple. Now, like I said, this article came out a few days after the Mike Rupp interview. I'd already talked about him going to Anaheim, and we looked at some other scenarios because his name, like I said, is popping up a lot in the rumor mill, and lots of writers and NHL reporters are talking about Nylander and a variety of trade proposals. Again, this is not saying that they're linked and that there is this might happen. This is just a writer's opinion saying, hey, why couldn't he come here? Does it not make sense for our team to do this? And he does have some good points, although the writer's opinion in this case does kind of give more of the thought process that he doesn't see the Leafs trading Nylander in season. He thinks it's something that would happen at the end of the season, but before free agency, that the Leafs essentially hang on to Nylander as their own rental this year. Because in that part makes sense. As much as I've said, I don't know that Nylander's future is in Toronto because as we stand today at least, and things can change in a heartbeat, but as we stand right now, they're nowhere near terms on the contract. They're far apart. And obviously that means that the odds are against them of getting it done. Could things change though, like I said, in a heartbeat? Yes, they could. Nylander's going to have to take less than what's being reported for it to make it work though. Or they're going to be really cash strapped in a worse predicament cap-wise than they even were before with all that money tied up in their top four forwards. It's just not, I don't think, great, team construction-wise, especially if they don't get the Stanley Cup and get everything won this year, because it's a big year for Toronto. And if they can't prove yet again that these four forwards are worth paying this much and can't come close to getting a cup, then certainly you got to try something different. It's just that simple. And Nylander appears to be the odd man out there. I mean, like I said, we'll see how things play out. But obviously with Chicago getting fortunate to get Connor Bedard as the number one pick in the 23 draft, that changes everything for them, and they could easily accelerate this rebuild. They do have lots of other picks. They have lots of other prospects. I agree with the concept that Toronto, if they trade Nylander sometime during the season, the only way that's going to happen is if they somehow find a 1-for-1 deal or something, or a one for a trade comparable to the Matthew Tkachuk scenario, where they can bring back another star player at a contract that does work for them and that can help them right away. You're not going to see the Leafs, I don't think, make a trade involving William Nylander during the season that is a future-based package where they get prospects and picks, because they're going to be. Yes, it would set them up maybe for the future a little bit to get some fresh young talent in the mix, but it's going to set them back this year from having less offense and just less potent team. They're not going to do that. Winning is more important than any single contract right now, And that, to me, just makes more sense. But obviously, like I said, we've seen Chicago load up on overpaying some veterans this year. Clearly they brought in some guys like Taylor Hall as well. What of a top line with Connor Bedard for the first number of years of his career, if he can play, center with Taylor Hall and William Nylander. That would be a pretty sick line. I think that could really work in Chicago and get some tremendous production. And then they can start building around that. They got lots of other, good players as well that are coming up in the ranks. Some are playing college hockey. We're probably going to see a bit of Korchinski this year. Lucas Reichel. You get Frank Nazar coming up. There's lots of talent and more picks coming. There's more and more, more guys I didn't even mention. So, it does make sense that they would be in the mix. They can afford to give him the money, and he could be a great help for Bedard, and he could be the guy there for a while. Obviously, Bedard's going to likely steal the spotlight eventually, but it does make some sense. But let me know what you think. Does Willie stay in Toronto? Does he end up on a team like Chicago or Anaheim and a rebuilding team where he can get the money he wants and help them accelerate their rebuilds? Does that make more sense? Will Pettersson stay in Vancouver? Will they get it worked out? Lots largely going to depend on how the season goes. So let me know your thoughts on everything to discuss today in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.